Right.
Okay, Lindsay, this morning we have too many people to do intros,
Yes.
right? If we have 34, that would take 20 minutes or so. So we're gonna have to bypass it.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, agreed.
Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you're located. We'll just get started in a minute. We're just waiting for others to join. Okay, well, I know we have a lot to cover today, so we'll get started. I'll just let others in as they come in. Welcome, everybody, to the PAC Global Golden Design Rules training course in partnership with the Canada Plastics Pact. Today, we have 2 hours of packed content for you. We do encourage you to ask questions. I know it's a lot to digest, so if you have any questions that come up during the session, please do enter them into the chat area, and we will do our best to address those. I'd like to introduce you to Dan Lance, our PacNext Canada Director, and Andrew McDonald, our PacNext Program Manager. So they will take you through the course today, and I will turn it directly over to Dan to kick it off.
Good morning, Lindsay. Thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. As Lindsay said, please do not hesitate to stop me at any time and ask questions. This is informal. We have a little too many to go through, everybody, but generally we run this as more of a roundtable. And you know, we learn as much from you with what you've got for your packaging and the questions you ask as we do from presenting it to you. So please do not hesitate to stop me. So we'll get right into it. So consumers are looking for more sustainable packaging. It's getting to the point now where a consumer just doesn't walk in and say, okay, I need one of those and one of those and one of those. Some people do, of course. There's always a fraction that do it that way. But a lot of the time now, consumers are saying, listen, the way I participate in helping save the environment is I want to know that my package is recyclable when I'm done with it, or I can reuse it. And you can see that in the infographic on the right, where packaging is recyclable. 2/3 of the people expect it to be recyclable, and about a half expect it to be reusable. On that note, Andrew, who's my co-lead on this today, he teaches a course in reusables, which I really encourage you to take up. Reusables are growing very quickly in the marketplace. So if you don't move to recyclable or reusable or use bio-based sources for your packaging, as seen in the infographic, it's going to end up costing sales, because what ends up happening is the consumer goes into the store and says, okay, I've got this and this, and on other value propositions, you know, price, quality, volume, whatever, they look at it and go, yeah, they're the same, but oh, that package isn't recyclable. Oh, this one is recyclable. Okay, I'm going to buy this one. And it's gotten to that point now. And in fact, it's this drive to by the consumer to expecting more from their packaging in terms of recyclability, for example, that's causing the consumer products goods manufacturers to set goals for 100% recyclable, recycled content, reusability by 2025 or 2030, and it's all over the place in that front. So the Golden Design Rules, the Golden Design Rules were developed with the New Plastics Economy, which is from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. The Golden Design Rules are specifically related to plastics. We do offer a course in sustainable packaging, which looks at all packaging types, not just plastic, but today our focus is just on plastic. So the idea is that you don't use virgin resources from fossil fuels to make the plastics. You can see that number 3, but rather preferably use it for renewably sourced virgin feedstocks. So corn, wheat straw, bagasse, whatever it is that you're using. And you design and produce the packaging such that the use is going to ensure that it can be recycled or reused, as you can see from the inner circle here, or the outer racetrack, as I call it, with a small amount might end up going to anaerobic digestion and composting. We're not going to get into that, and the Golden Design Rules do not address compostable packaging. The only reference they make to anything like that is on oxodegradables, which are not to be used going forward, but there's no discussion over when bio-based certified compostable packaging should be used. A small amount will go to energy recovery, but it's considered a linear approach because you can't recapture that material. It's lost to the economy once it's been burnt. And then you get a small amount, and this is where a lot of the plastics policies and programs are coming about now, is because of this leakage. A small percentage of the plastic is ending up, it's not by weight, it's a lot, but a small percentage of the plastic is ending up in our oceans as ocean plastic in the Pacific Gyre. Most of that, the vast majority of that is coming out of the Far East countries. A small amount does come out of Canada and the US, but a very tiny amount, and Western Europe as well. But just as importantly for North Americans and for Europeans is we end up with plastic in our inland waterways. I don't know where everybody's from today, but Toronto is the largest city we've got in Canada. If you ever see the Don River, which is one of the major rivers flowing through Toronto, after a major storm, we've got plastic flowing down the river. So it washes in and then ends up in Lake Ontario, one of the Great Lakes, which is a huge source of fresh water for many, many people. And so it's not good, not to mention it hurts the wildlife, of course. So the idea is to eliminate all leakage of plastic into the natural system. Once it's in the system, the idea is to have it go around and around and around. So ideally would be things like bottle to bottle. So we would have a PET water bottle, #1 plastic, and you drink it, you put it in your blue box or your cart, and then you send it back around, it gets recycled and made into another bottle, and it goes around and around. And there's an example of that right here in Canada where that is happening. Now, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't consider other forms of recycling, and this is my personal bias, but if a company, for example, Patagonia, makes their jackets out of recycled PET bottles, or Image Carpet makes their carpeting out of PET. A lot of carpet is made out of PET. And if you say, no, you can't do that, you've got to put it back into packaging, then really you're saying to these companies, okay, no, we want all of our plastic for packaging. You have to go and find alternative resources. Well, hold on a second. They're still virgin resources as opposed to recycled resources. Why not just use and make sure that all packaging that's captured gets recycled? I think it's a much stronger message to say, if you produce plastic packaging, make sure you capture 100% of it and recycle it or reuse it where possible. And then 100% is quite critical because typically goals are not 100%, they tend to be 50%. And so we got a long way to go if we're going to say we got to capture it because it's a lost resource. And the reason I say that 50% is a goal, but we're not there. Just a second. Next slide. There we go. Sorry, I have to use my mouse. My up and down cursor is not working today. You can see in Canada that with a goal of 50% recycling rate for all plastic, when you look at the two most common plastics, PET and HDPE, #2 plastics, we are over 50% for the country. Now, Europe is even, for Canada as a whole, all plastics are about, I think it's 35%. The US is about 9%, and in Europe, it's about 42%, give or take, currently. But we're not at 50, and you can see we have a lot of laggard in that in terms of where we are in the recycling. Some of it doesn't get recycled at all. For example, other plastics like PLA, PHA, blends of plastics are marked #7. Honey bottles, for example, are #7 plastic. And then we've got plastic multi-laminated packaging. That's all sorts of things we'll get into later on in one of the Golden Design Rules. But you can see we got a long way to go. And the world has a long way to go. Even with Europe higher than everybody else, they still have a long way to go to get to at least 50%. And even at that, that means we're still wasting half of the resources we put in the marketplace with respect to plastic packaging. And that's not good. So because of all that, a number of people a number of companies, 42 as a matter of fact, got together. And this is a company initiative. This is not a government initiative. They got together, worked out of Europe. It was co-led by Unilever and Loblaw, who's the largest retailer in Canada. Unilever is the #4 consumer products goods manufacturer in the world. And they got together, they led it and developed the Golden Design Rules. Now, I am not going to, of course, speak to the Golden Design Rules on this one slide, but I will introduce it. And the reason I've shown this slide is because of what they're addressing with the Golden Design Rules. Share of plastic packaging by type and how it's addressed. Flexibles, which is still growing by upwards of 10% annually in the marketplace, is 51% of the packaging that's addressed by the Golden Design Rules. It's number 3, 4, 6, and 8. Flexibles are a growing percentage, but they're also a growing problem. They're very, very difficult to manage in the recycling system for all sorts of reasons. And I'll introduce some of them as we go. So you can see that the big focus was on flexibles. There's Flexibles Task Force in the Canada Plastics Pact and then MacArthur. And the idea is we have to really address what we're going to do with this portion of the stream, plastic stream. 20% of the stream is HDP and polypropylene rigids, addressed by Golden Design Rules 7 and 8. 17% is addressed by one Golden Design Rule, PET, and PET is the most common plastic that's used in packaging today. 8% is problematic. They call it problematic. I prefer to call it hard to manage because technically all plastics are recyclable. They just don't get recycled. There's a difference in those statements. So we've got polyvinyl chloride, PVC, polystyrene, and Europe uses a short form of ES for what we call in North America EPS, expanded polystyrene, cushion packaging. So that's Golden Design Rule 2, and PET trays. So that's the thermoform, the trays, the cake plates, the cake covers, things like that, that you get bakery, in your baker aisle or your produce aisle, for example, for spinach and lettuces. That's a Golden Design Rule number 5, the 3%. So I'm going to speak to each of those now. So why the Golden Design Rules for Canada? Why the Golden Design Rules at all? To be honest, it isn't just for Canada, but focus here with CPP is why for Canada. We need consistency in the plastics that are used, which allows for economies of scale. We were on a call the other day and we're talking about opportunities to recycle polystyrene. And it isn't that polystyrene shouldn't be recycled. It's just there's so little of it left. And in terms of generation rates right now, the estimate is roughly about 1/6 as much polystyrene is generated compared to HDPE, for example. So that means HDPE, there's 6 times more HDPE generated in the market than there is polystyrene. So when you see how little it is, and when you consider the vast array of recycling facilities across the country, across North America, across Europe, putting a lot of time, effort, and money when you've got an optical sorter that might cost $250,000 Canadian, putting that much money into something to capture a very, very tiny portion of the recycling stream, it starts to not make a lot of sense from an economies of scale perspective. Material does get captured, it doesn't typically get recycled. It can in some jurisdictions. Quebec actually collects and recycles it. They've got 2 chemical recycling facilities in Montreal, Polystyrene and Pyrowave, where they recycle polystyrene. So it does in some areas, but we don't have it at scale, generally speaking, outside of that, other than on the West Coast where they take the expanded polystyrene, if it's white, and they can ship it over to China. I know we're not shipping waste plastic. We're shipping a densified, pure, very, very valuable stream of material over to China, and they make it into things like picture frames, for example, that you see in stores all over the place. The black picture frames, those are generally recycled polystyrene. So it moves from plastic packaging from non-recycled to, or not recycled, as I was explaining with the likes of polystyrene. PVC is not recycled. Other plastics are not recycled. Other plastics simply because there's so many combinations in there, you can't make one plastic out of it. To recyclable, we want that. We want more of what we want, which is number 1, 2, 4, and 5. We'll get into that a little later. And as such, that's why the Golden Design Rules are set up. With increased use and capture, increased material available for recycled content. Europe's got 30% recycled content for PET beverage bottles by 2030. Canada is in the midst of, they're starting to release their regulations around plastics. They started with single-use plastics yesterday, so don't look for any more straws, plastic bags, etc. in here going forward. But the other part they're looking at is what percentage of recycled content should we have for packaging? And they're settling on 30 now. It's just a matter of whether they do it for all packaging or just there's limitations technically to be able to make food grade plastics other than PET or HDP natural. So they're trying to figure out what to do with that. So before I get going, are there any quick questions? We're good. Okay. Golden design rule number 1 is about PET. The focus on golden design rule, first of all, it's only the bottles for PET, not the thermoforms. That's golden design rule number 5. The bottles should be uncolored, and uncolored means not opaque. You can be light blue or light green as color options only, or clear, but you must be able to see through the bottle. So you can't have a bottle that you can't see through. They also don't want to see. There's every color of PET in the rainbow out there. You can have purple, and I've seen them, purple and pink and yellow and green, and I mean dark green. But it's still clear, but it's very dark. They don't want any dark colors. They want to see nothing but uncolored. The idea is that they want to be able to go from uncolored to uncolored PET, whether it's for more bottles or for other purposes. But specifically speaking, they want bottle to bottle, and clear bottles, make clear bottles. So to keep the color out. The other thing is to ensure there's no material choice. So the label that's on the bottle, the adhesive, is not problematic. So if you have a PET bottle and it's got a full body sleeve that's made out of HDPE, for example, it goes through the optical sorter at a recycling facility. The optical sorter sees HDPE and not PET. What's going to happen is it'll sort it with the HDPE, but then it's lost to the system. The HDPE market doesn't want PET. The HDPE market wants HDPE. So golden design rule number 8 speaks to HDPE and polypropylene, but it's the same across all packaging. Make sure that the label is compatible with the bottle such that it can be found, but also that it will not be problematic for recycling. So, you have to be careful of that. PETG is not compatible with PET. If you look at orange juice bottles, for example, in the marketplace, if it's got a full, the larger jugs, if you can put your hand through the handle, and I know you'll turn it over, like next time you're in the grocery store, I can see everybody's going to go in the grocery store next time, they're going to turn the bottle over and you're going to see on the bottom, it says PETE, but you're also going to see a straight line across the bottom of the bottle, right? That's not blow molded. Sorry, not injection mold. It's injection molded, not blow molded, right? That line is just like making a detergent bottle. There's a line across the bottom. That's PETG, even though it's marked PETE. If you see right beside it, there's probably an orange juice jug, but you can't put your hand all the way through the handle. You can only go part way into it. That's PETE. It's because you can't injection mold a PET with a handle in it. You need to make it blow molded, and so you can't blow in the handle. So you have to hang on to the jug really carefully. But if you turn the bottle upside down, you'll see there's a dot in the center. That's a PETE. So it's not only a problem because PETG is not compatible, it causes huge problems for PETE recyclers, but it's also mislabeled. So the public gets confused, and Andrew's going to talk to proper labeling on it with the How to Recycle label in Golden Design Rule number 9 a little later. The other thing is that when opaque, no black at all in PET. You are allowed black in the other plastics as long as it's discoverable black, but you cannot use black in PET at all, ever, in opaque. So it's not to be used. Oop. So you see the bottles on the left, those are acceptable. The ones on the right need to be replaced, right? You can't see through the bottles on the right. They're great colors. I actually was doing some research for another presentation I'm doing on this for a specific client and for their products. And it was really interesting. It was for automotive, which typically are using PVC, but in this case it was PET. But instead of using colored PET bottles, opaque, what they did was they changed the color of the liquid for each of the different purposes for these automotive cleaners. They have one for tires and one for leather and one for detailing, et cetera, et cetera. But each one was a different color. So it looked like a yellow, pink, purple, green, orange. I think there was 8 colors in this rainbow of products they put on the shelf, but it made it look like this, but it was a very compatible PETE clear bottle. So it was great. It's a good application. Now, those bottles can't be made back into more food grade bottles, but they can be made into other non-food grade applications. So no PVC, PVDC, and PETE, PETG, and PELA labels. The reason for that is that when they go for recycling and they take the labels off, whether it's through a wet scrub, a dry scrub, whatever it is, and then they do a sink float to get the PET separated primarily from the lids, right? The lids are for water bottles, for example, or polyethylene. For soda bottles, soft drink bottles, they are polypropylene. But the label, if it's PVC, PVDC, PETG, and PLA, first bullet there, they will sink with the PET. PET sinks, it's got a density greater than 1, so it'll sink in the water. But if there's all those other materials in there, of course, now they're going to be putting that into the reactor and then melting it down, et cetera, washing it, and then they're going to try and make PETE out of it, but they've got these contaminants. So make sure that you're not using any contaminating labels that will sync with the PET, making it that much more difficult to make PETE. Full body PETE shrink can be used only if the color can be removed. In other words, the ink washes out. So if you think about it, if the sleeve is PETE, which is good, that's a good first step. At least they can find the bottle. But if the ink is impermeable and can't be washed out, you've in effect created an opaque PETE label on the bottle, which means it's going to contaminate the PETE clear. Label should not exceed 75%. That's because the optical sorters need a small portion of the bottle to be able to see that it is that. It will discount the label up to that amount because it'll see the top and the bottom. Typically, you see on the labels, you can see the neck and you can see the base. So if there's 25% of the bottle that the machine can identify it as PETE, it will shoot it. Sorry, I should slow down. Not everybody's from the recycling industry. An optical sorter uses near infrared and visible spectrums of light, which scans over everything that's on the belt. So it'll have all the plastics there. And each optical sorter will be assigned a plastic. So the map, right, of what the plastic looks like in those spectrums of light will be inside the machine. And so say the first machine's looking for PET, it'll go scan, scan, scan. No, that's HDP. No, that's polypropylene. No, that's PVC. No, I don't want any of those. Oh, PET, great. About 4 or 6 inches, depends on the manufacturer. Later, there's a bar with air ejections in it. And what it'll do is it'll eject out that PETE bottle. It'll go, great, that's what I want. And it'll fire on it and it'll sort it. So we don't sort them by hand anymore, except in the very small, little tiny facilities. It's all done with optical sorters. So that each one of the optical sorters can be set up, and some plants have, more than 10 different optical sorters. They can have one for clear PET, green and light blue PET. They can have HDP natural, HDP colored, polypropylene. Some do polystyrene. They might separate it out if they've got a market for it, and et cetera. And so each one of these things can be used. In fact, you can use optical sorters for aluminum cans. They do use them for aseptic and poly-coated cartons. So they're very effective at getting out a lot of material very quickly from a line. So. Okay, any questions on Golden Design Rule number 1?
Yeah, Dan, Andrew here, everyone, hello. So first question was, is the incompatibility between PET and PETG addressed in the rules guidelines? And I was actually just about to tap out a chat response saying yes. There is language, it actually ends up being under rule number 2.
Yeah.
So Felipe, the answer is yes. So you should find that there. And
yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
it is under 2, Andrew, but because PET is most often substituted for PETE, I prefer to speak to it in Golden Design Rule number 1. They only speak to it for the labels. So anyhow, go ahead.
Yeah. And then a question from Carolyn, just asking if you could just recap briefly the why behind the no color in the bottles for rule number 1.
When PET is recycled, it gets melted down. If they're trying to make clear bottles out of clear bottles and thermoforms, and I'll get into that in Golden Design Rule number 5. I don't know where you're from, Carolyn, but in Europe, they typically separate the thermoforms from the bottles. And in the US, they do the same thing if they're even collecting the thermoforms in the US. In Canada, we don't do that. We don't need to do that, but I'll get into that a little later. Anyhow, an opaque bottle, if it's melted down, the color doesn't disappear. The only exception to that is something called CPET. I'll speak to that a little later. Crystallized PET, which gets the color through its secondary heating in the process of thermoforming the container. But otherwise, when you melt it down, you've now got, you saw those colors. Say you had that dark blue in there, and now it's in the mixture, and you're trying to make a clear PET bottle, and you've got dark blue and dark red and dark green and everything, where the color is still there. It doesn't come out. The only way it can come out is through chemical recycling processes, and they're not addressed here. And there isn't chemical recycling really. There's a little bit of PET, but primarily the easiest and the most commonly used method of recycling PET is mechanically. So it's just a matter of, washing it, separating it, they flake it and they clean it with water, caustic solutions, scrubbing systems, whatever it is. They put it through a bath of it here in nitrogen to raise the intrinsic viscosity up so they can make more bottles from the thermoform. They blend it all together. But if they've got all these dark colors in there, they're trying to make a clear bottle. You can't make a clear bottle when you've got all those colors in it. It'll end up being gray and it'll just get darker and darker. It won't be see-through anymore. And so you can imagine if you're trying to buy a product, you want it to be in a very clear bottle, and they can make clear bottles out of PET, no problem. But with all those colors in there, the colors would end up degrading the quality and the color of the recycled PET pellet and then the preform and then the bottles themselves. Does that address the question?
Yeah, Dan, and I hope, Mihaela, I hope that answers your question too, because Dan just spoke to the opaque, the issues with opaque coloring, white or other colors. So if you have a follow-up, by all means, signal that to me in the chat, but otherwise I think we're okay to move on.
Great, thanks, Andrew. Okay, golden design rule number 2. This one's got all of the, these are what they call problematic. You can see it. It says remove problematic elements from plastic packaging. It's as much don't use certain plastics as it is the problematic elements. So no undetectable carbon black using today's technology. Black plastic is actually, I'll address it on the next slide, but no black plastic unless you can find it. There are examples of black plastic in the marketplace that when it goes under the optical sorter, it fluoresces, so to speak, blue. The machine sees it as blue. Unilever uses it in their Tresemme shampoo bottles, for example. So you can think about all those takeout containers you've had from quick service restaurants, and they've all come in a nice little black trace, right? Usually PET or polypropylene. And you put one of those on the belt, it goes through and the machine can't see it, right? Because it's shining light down on it, but it's a black container on black belt. Well, with a Tresemme container, for example, it shines down and says, oh, blue container. Oh, it's made out of HDPE. Shoot, fire, right? When it gets to the HDPE sorter. So no undetectable carbon black, no PVC, no PVDC at all. That is a problematic element for PET if it can't be removed. Now, they do sort it out even at the end market. Even if it is sorted out at the recycling facility, they do sort it again for PVC. That's a huge contaminant issue, not to mention health issue because of chlorine off-gassing when you melt PVC. No EPS or polystyrene rigids. So any cushion packaging, but no polystyrene rigids right now. That's what Golden Design Rule says. So no, typically where you're going to see polystyrene is in snap-off yogurt cups. Those are, generally speaking, HIPS, high impact polystyrene. And they call it HIPS because there's some rubber in it, but they're polystyrene primarily. So they're saying eliminate that, no PETG. We've already addressed that in Golden Design Rule number 1, but they're just saying don't use it at all. And no oxodegradables. So an oxodegradable is a package that when it's exposed to oxygen will go from the full bottle, for example, down to little tiny particles, small particles. So the polymer chains are set up to break down. But what you end up with is if they don't even go further, they create microplastics. And everybody's heard a lot about microplastics. Keepers are even talking about putting on screens inside your washing machines now to keep microplastics out of the water sources. And Yukon just announced this past week They're the only jurisdiction in the world right now that's actually measuring microplastics in the air we breathe, which doesn't sound good when you think about it. Yukon's in northern Canada. You'd hope that they don't have a lot, but they're finding it. They're finding microplastics in the far North Arctic. So no oxodegradables. The oxodegradable may or may not break down completely, but it takes way too long. So it's not considered compostable, but it's such that you don't want it in the marketplace, because imagine if you had an oxodegradable PET bottle and you spent, a couple $100 on that beautiful new Patagonia jacket, and over time it starts getting little pock marks in it. You're going, what in the world's going on? Oh, that's because they made it, there was some oxodegradable PET in there. Can't have that. Same with the carpeting. Imagine you're getting pock marks in your carpeting, and they give a 10-year guarantee on those carpets. So no oxodegradables. So black plastic is a growing problem. A couple of reasons. One, like I said, is you think about it, it's on the belt, you can't see it. But the other thing is that even with all the black plastic is out there, and I was doing some work in a recycling facility late last year, and the percentage of black plastic as a percentage of all of it, it was tremendous. It was over 10%, I'll swear. Like, we didn't do absolute measurements on it, but there is so much black plastic now. And the problem is it comes in number 1, number 2, number 4, number 5, and number 6 resin. Well, there are optical sorters in the marketplace right now that can find black. So they're new, they're very expensive. So the idea of seeing it on the belt, there's a couple of technologies out now. They're not widely used. That's why the Golden Design Rule says with current technologies, not evolving technology. But that's one thing to get all the black plastic off. Ideally, though, you want the number 1 to go, number 1, no black, period. So let's just assume that's gone now. But the number 2, 4, 5, you want the 2s to go with 2s, the 4s to go with 4s, the 5s to go with 5s, et cetera. If you can't see it, you can't sort it. So trying to find the resin within the black is even more difficult. And they're working on it. Technologies are evolving on that. But generally speaking, none are recognizable today with today's technologies found in most MRF is a material recovery facility, a recycling facility. It's where all of your stuff from your curbside or your apartment or even your depots, that's where it all goes. It has to be sorted. So it has to be manually sorted. So you got a bunch of people on the line all pulling off pieces of black plastic. It generally goes to an end market mixed together. They have different technologies they can do at scale to separate some of the black plastic, not all of them. They can use electrostatic processes to separate out the polyolefin. So that's the 2, 4, and 5. They can separate those out, but they can't separate all of them, which means you're losing some. They can also use sink float to separate the 2, 4, and 5. They can go further and separate the HDPE and LDPE are not completely compatible with polypropylene, even though they're both what's called polyolefins. But they can do some separation of that. So they can high grade it a little bit. Just takes an awful lot of work for that application. If it was discoverable, in other words, if there was this chemical in it that made it show up as its true resin rather than just this black blob, then they could sort it and put it into the right thing, and then they could make it into more plastic containers. Now, one of the reasons that companies do like it, recyclers like black plastic, is that it's great for non-food applications of recycled content. Drainage tiles are black, for example. They're often made of black plastic, recycled. And so when you blend all the colors together, you typically end up with a gray or a black plastic. And so it's great to have them, to put them in, because they can be made into applications that are non-food grade. Of course, the idea with the circular economy is keep them going around and around, and it should be package to package. So this is I've got the PVDC. There's a PVDC bottle, and you can tell, like I said, because you can see there's a place where you can put your hand through it. So this is PVDC. You don't want that. This is our award winners, Tim Hortons. They had polystyrene lids. They moved to polypropylene lids in brown. They've gone one step further now. In some jurisdictions across Canada, they've now got polypropylene white lids. So the white is worth more than the brown because you can do more with the white. They do color separate some other plastics at the end markets because they do make recycled materials with certain colors. Blue Planet, for example, with Canadian Tire, is recycled plastic and it's blue. So a lot of their products, they get it from recycled material. So they do color separation to get the blue material out. So there's one example of it. Avoid PETG. You see them a lot in cosmetic bottles. We've got it here in the orange juice bottle. here's an example of, talk about getting right out of any issues with respect to plastics in the market. They've moved to paper-based packaging. So there's another one of our PAC award winners for packaging design. So eliminating problematic plastic. The other thing with getting rid of these problematic plastics is if we got rid of them, then what we're doing, we're telling the people is focus on putting your packaging in 1, 2, 4, 5. You see the green Mobius loops there. And by the way, you're not allowed to use Mobius loops with the thing that you often see them on packaging, but they're supposed to just be triangles. Everybody's still using the Mobius loop. Not supposed to. Anyhow, but if you work on 1, 2, 4, and 5, what we're going to do is increase the amount of that that's available, increase the amount that can be captured, increase the yields and the bales that go to market. Typically a bale or 1s go by themselves, 2s go by themselves, but 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 in smaller programs all go blended together to a market. Well, imagine if we had no 3, 6, and 7, and all they had was 4 and 5 and some 2 tubs, like ice cream tubs, for example. If you've had that all together, then the yield at the market would be that much higher. The cost should come down. They can do more with it. They're not, the other materials are not going anywhere except to recycling. PVC is thrown away. Polystyrene and other can be shredded and made into alternative fuel. So it gives you an opportunity to increase the amount of material that's kept in the economy. And that's exactly what the Golden Design Rules are all about, one of the key goals. So bio-based plastics are okay, right? That's not a problem with using bio-based. Now, bio-based does not mean compostable. Bio-based means they come from biological sources. So for example, corn is commonly used to make bottles, for example. Not a problem. It's great, but you can't use anything that is compostable or degradable in the bottles that are in the plastic applications that are in the marketplace today. As I mentioned earlier, they don't talk about compostables today. So for example, PLA is the most common compostable plastic. That will be coming. Not sure when, but they are working on something. The difficulty with discussing compostables is one rule is there's too many different technologies in the marketplace for composting, including anaerobic digestion, and what might go through one composter won't go through another. Certified compostable packaging is still not widely accepted in the marketplace because, again, the technologies are so different, even though they've now been tested and got a certification on them. But long story short, for the Golden Design Rules, they don't speak to compostables right now, and it's best just to avoid any compostable packaging in order to be compliant with the Golden Design Rules. So before I move on to the next Golden Design Rule, are there any questions?
Yeah, Dan, a question from Felipe regarding PET bottles and labels. And you may end up addressing this, but Felipe is curious about in-mold labels and on with PET bottles, and I guess any corresponding issues or things to think about.
Well, in-mold labels are fine, again, under 2 conditions. One, it's the same as the bottle itself. So you find in-mold labels a lot with laundry detergent, with dairy products, so yogurts and cottage cheeses and cream cheeses, et cetera. And laundry detergent, a lot of the bottles that you see in the marketplace today have got all got in-mold labels, but the in-mold label is the same as the bottle, HDPE or polypropylene for the tubs, for example. In PET, if the in-mold label was PET, that would be okay. Or if, because in the recycling system mechanically, they don't delayer so much, right? And so the idea is that when you melt it down, and that if there's too much color in there, you're now going to degrade the ability to make another clear PET bottle. So in-mold label with PET can be difficult. I'm not sure how you're going to get the color out of that. So, you know, I'm not sure. I don't think it's in PET that it's the first time anybody's ever asked me about PET in-mold labeling. The Golden Design Rules don't express them explicitly, other than any label within the PET should be compatible with PET. So in-mold, it would have to be PET to start, but the color is going to be an issue because in effect, the label then makes it an opaque bottle.
So, yeah, Dan, I'm not sure if you see this too. I don't think you do, but the follow-up being, so in the end, is it desirable to just avoid IML on PET altogether within that.
Yeah, because I don't know, I'm not a labeling expert by any stretch. I'm a recycler by trade. I've more than 3 decades in recycling systems development and operations. But so yeah, the INMO label in PET, I don't know how we'd get the color out of the label, right? In the mechanical process. Like I said, the bottles don't delaminate in the recycling process, because you certainly wouldn't want that. Imagine somebody using it and all of a sudden the bottle starts to fall apart. Making it opaque in effect, and the opaque is not desired or wanted. And in fact, if there was too much color in it, it would probably be ejected out of the line altogether. So if they couldn't get the label out, they might pull it right out of the line and not recycle it anyhow.
Yeah, okay. Well, we hope that helps, Felipe.
Anything else, Andrew?
No, onwards and upwards.
Okay, great. So Golden Design Rule number 3 is around headspace for flexible packs. So that is flow wraps. Think around what's you've got around a chocolate bar, for example, or stand-up pouches, bags, a bag of potatoes, stand-up pouch of your favorite peanuts or chocolate-covered almonds or candy or whatever, cereal. There's so many things that come in stand-up pouches nowadays. But so the idea is that no package should have more than 30% of airspace in it. The Competition Bureau in Canada has a rule over headspace. The US has a slack fill rule. Europe, different countries have got slack fill rules. Somebody's asked me, why is it 30%? I don't know what the 30% is. I haven't been able to track down an answer to that, but it's all consistent. That 30% seems to be the number. The idea is that when if there's too much headspace, 2 things. It legally, if you are misleading the public, so in other words, when the public opens up the package with their food or whatever in it, and they look in and go, my goodness, where's all my food? I thought I was buying this much food and I'm only getting this much food, then it's misleading, right? So that's the problem, and that the laws in the different jurisdictions address more so than you're wasting packaging. Now, from the Golden Design Rule perspective, you're wasting packaging, right? If you've got 30% of your package is just airspace and not holding product, then that's a lot of excess packaging. And the idea is to eliminate excess packaging. So there's the Golden Design Rule for slack fill in North America. This is Canada's. It's almost identical for the United States. As I said, that the consumer might reasonably be misled with respect to the quantity of the product, right? In other words, they think they're buying this much and they're only getting this much. Pretty punitive penalties if you don't, right? $250,000 in imprisonment for up to 3 years just for making your package too large. Again, this doesn't relate to package waste. It relates to misleading the public. All of them are. But Golden Design Rule, don't mislead the public, right? And don't waste packaging, sorry. So what it's suggesting is that if you're going to have this package, so here's a couple of examples, right? Here's a flow wrap, horizontal. You got this nice chocolate bar, and it's a big one. It's 30 centimeters of packaging, but you're allowed to have 21 centimeters. You have to have at least 21 centimeters of chocolate within the 30 centimeter package. And it's from the point where it's sealed, not the whole length of the package. That's something else to consider, right? But this area can't be more than 30%. Here's a stand-up pouch. Now, this is a linear measurement, and I say that specifically, I'll explain in a second here. The idea is that, again, you got a 30 centimeter tall pouch to the seal line here, right? You can't have more than 9 centimeters of airspace before you hit product here. Now, in a flow wrap package, using a straight linear measurement might make sense because there's no volume associated with it. A bar of chocolate is quite small, it's quite thin. So having in a flow wrap situation, 30% as a linear measurement might not be a bad thing. But when you start getting into filling in a pouch, like even think about cereal, or even though it's not in a stand-up pouch, the cereal would be in a bag inside of a box, for example. Now you're getting into a point where you're going, hold on a second, think about it. The pouch, I don't know if people can see my fingers, but hopefully they can, but your pouch is this shaped. So linearly, it might be this, but when you think about the geometry of it like this now, I'm going to close it, it might only be 10% of the volume of the package. So, it possibly is the right size package for it, because when you start thinking about fill lines, we had a call on this recently because they're talking about changing it to looking at the geometry. So in other words, what's that space relative to the space of the whole pouch? And it's called brimful measurement. So in other words, when you go to seal the package initially, then it fills to the brim. Now, what ends up happening as it's driving down the road and transportation and packing and people buying it and throwing it in their cart and taking it home and everything, it's the product sinks, right? It starts to settle inside the pouch. So by the time you get home, there might be a bit of airspace like this, but when they first fill it on a fill line, it might be what's called brimful. The difficulty with brimful is the measurement is that depending on what it is, like one gentleman, he was from a company that made pet food. And he said, well, if I make the pet food here in this jurisdiction, it's brimful at this, but if I fill it over here, it's not, because of the density of the products that they're using to make it. It's the same food, but the feedstocks that go into making the food are slightly different, depending on where they purchased their ingredients for their dog food. And as such, what can be brimful here isn't brimful here. And he said, so now I've got to make separate fill lines with separate rules for separate jurisdictions, and that's just too complicated because they want to use the same package for the most part, other than maybe what the information is or the language on the information. So there's all sorts of issues. The same thing was mentioned about liquid detergents in particular, because sometimes when they fill, they start to foam a little bit, so you wouldn't want to have it closed and then the foaming or anything, even if it was a product, say it was a dairy product or whatever, you don't want anything coming out over the top, because now it's a health and safety concern for the public. You're also losing product. So that's, believe me, losing product is much, much worse than losing the packaging. Many-fold times worse. The package is only 5 to 10% of the environmental impact of a product delivered and used by a consumer. So best not to avoid, to have any product loss at all. So they're talking about that. But then depending on what it is, I was talking, Andrew and I were doing a presentation recently to one client. They were talking about, well, we have bread that goes in, but it can be different shapes. And they said, well, you could make it wider, but then one company was saying during our discussion of, well, no, what they do for their packaging is brimful with a syringe. So what they do is they say, okay, here's how much it can hold as a whole, the package. They take it, they seal it, and then they suck the air out of it and measure the volume of air that came out of it, and it can't be more than 30%. But again, it's got limited applications of which can be done. They have not decided on what the new rule is going to be, because obviously a stand-up pouch with a vertical fill doesn't make sense. But just bear in mind, the whole thing, regardless of what the final approach is, or it might be multiple approaches, is don't waste packaging, right? So look at your fill lines, et cetera. One company, one discussion we had during our meeting there a month ago was, well, maybe we need to have vibrators on the fill lines. Well, that complicates the filling process, et cetera. So it settles as it's filling, so therefore you get a better idea of what your slack fill is right away. So on the right there, we've got another one of our award winners from PAC is the Tide liquid detergent. It's a bladder bag inside. Think of it as like a bag of wine, a bag in a box of wine. So this is a bag in a box of laundry detergent, and it fills right to the top. It's sealed off, and then so there's no slack fill at all. Any questions on number 3?
So far, good. Oh, sorry, go ahead. Yeah, please.
Sorry.
No. I thought we had a question coming through, but oh, we do. I thought I heard somebody got a pipe, but this is in the chat, Dan. So Felipe, thank you. The question is, in terms of measurement for GDR number 3, the 30% goal would be on, is that on area or on volume?
Well, right now it's on linear distance from the point where the product has filled to the sealed line at the top of the container, or in a flow wrap from the point where the chocolate bar ends and where it's sealed. Right now the Golden Design Rules strictly speaks to a linear measurement. The discussion is that it doesn't apply to all things, and plus the pouches, because of the way they fill and the fact they settle over time, it makes more sense to look at something else, which is the geometry. I guess you couldn't see my fingers, right? So the the top little triangle compared to the bottom huge part of the bag, right? The pouch. So that space is not 30%, even though by linear distance it might be 30. By geometrical space, the volume inside the bag, it might only be 10%. So that's one thing they're looking at, and they haven't decided on what the rule change is going to be. I'm just giving you a heads up because I'm part of the team. I was one of the team members that developed the Golden Design rules, and so I'm just giving you an update on where we're talking right now, just so that you're not going down one path when you know there might be a different path coming forward later. Anything else?
Yes. Oh, you know what it is? There's a bit of an echo for me. So that's what I was hearing before. So yeah, a separate question, Dan. So I'm just reading it now. GDR number 3 applies to the products sold in carton boxes, not only flexible pouches. So this is a clarification or validation that is correct. The example being skincare creams. Would skincare creams fall under this GDR as well?
Right now, if it's in a flexible pack, yes. If it's in a rigid pack, no. However, the other thing that they're talking about doing right now is extending this Golden Design rule to rigids as well, so that it would apply to anything in any plastic package, so that when you open it, it does not apply. You know, that juice carton you mentioned, the polycoated carton or aseptic carton, doesn't apply to that. Those are not plastic packages, although somebody should take a look at it, because there's a certain juice company here in Canada that has now put less package or less product inside an old package shape and size. I won't mention it because it ticked me off when I opened it up and I looked in and I said, where'd my juice go? So, but anyhow, it's the same idea though, whether it's that, but they have not extended it to rigid plastic packaging yet. They're in discussion about doing so. I don't see why they shouldn't. Again, same thing for purposes of slack fill. Somebody buys something, they open it up and go, good grief, you know, why have I only got 2/3 of a package of something? I was expecting more. That should then trigger the company to redesign their packaging to make it more in line with the amount of product that's being purchased. Something it's going to be curious to watch, because right now we've got what's called shrinkflation in our packaging, or sorry, our products that we're purchasing. Because inflation's now, you know, what is it, 8.7% last month in the US and 7.6 in Canada. I'm sorry, I don't know what it is in Europe right now. I'm sure it's closely in line with what's happening everywhere, because it tends to be a global phenomenon. The idea is, rather than increasing prices across the board, so, you know, they were picking on cheese slices, and what they did was, instead of you know, buying 16, you buy 14, and now they've even shrunk it, but at least they changed the size of the package. But some companies are going to go, I can't do that right now. It's too expensive to reconfigure my lines. You think about it, you're making new packaging. So what they're going to do is just put less in the package. And that's what this juice company has done. They took a 1.89 liter juice container and put 1.65 liters of juice in it, in effect shorting me the difference, right? And so you're sitting here going, oh, okay, so that's shrinkflation. So it'll be curious to keep an eye on your products in your pouches right now, to see whether shrinkflation is now creating a lot more headspace to the point where they're now breaking Golden Design Rule number 3, and more importantly, the regulations in all the countries with respect to slack fill. Any more questions?
Yeah, just looking at it, just came in hot off the press here. Perhaps it's a question for all the GDRs. How can we track successful implementation on each rule? The rules come with, do the rules, you know, come with a, you know, some sort of roadmap and key performance indicators, that sort of thing. So yeah, maybe that speaks to the voluntary nature of the rules, Dan.
Yeah, they are voluntary. Thank you, Andrew. And it's up to each company to track their own progress. There's no, you know, no overseeing body that says, oh my goodness, you're not doing this. One of the key takeaways that I put it in the conclusions is, you don't have to sign on to all the Golden Design rules. If your company can only do Golden Design Rule 4, 5, and 6, just do 4, 5, and 6. You don't have to do the others. And there are companies out there that have not signed on to all of them. They've signed on to some, or they've signed on to most, and some have signed on to all of them. So, you know, the idea is, do what you can. You track it yourself. There are overriding regulations around just the slack fill guidelines. right? Golden Design Rule number 3. So somebody's going to be keeping an eye on your packaging. If the consumer starts to complain to the Competition Bureau in Canada about their package being this big and their product being this big, you're going to probably hear from them. That's not going to come out of somebody from the Golden Design Rules. That's going to come from the federal government, right? But no, it's up to each company to track it themselves. Most of them are fairly straightforward to understand. You can measure your own slack fill. You can measure, when you're looking at your packaging, hold on, I got my whole product line is in clear PET bottles except one. I've got this fancy one that's in, a black PET that I really wanted to differentiate myself on the shelf. That's one obviously is not compatible. I have to change it. So they're not so difficult. You can't figure out what needs to be done on a rule by rule basis, I don't think.
Okay, good, Dan. Onwards. Number 4.
Okay. Golden Design Rule number 4. This is about plastic overwraps, only using them when necessary. So there, you go in, especially when you go to your favorite big barn store and you buy bulks of everything. And what they do is they don't make it necessarily one big one. What they do is they take a bunch of smaller ones and then wrap it. I was doing research again for another presentation that's coming up, and the multiple pack that they had wrapped in extra plastic was actually more expensive than buying multiples of the individual ones without the overwraps. So now you're going, okay, now what really was the purpose of that? Isn't that just absolute, over packaging? So imagine having 4 of something, they wrapped it in plastic and said, here, buy 4 and get it for this fantastic price. And I worked in a grocery store for 8 years. So for me, I go in a grocery store and I go, oh, 4, yeah, I need, oh, no, hold on a second. 4 times that equals that, that's 4, is that, I'm not buying that, I'm buying for individual. Looking for value, of course. So sometimes the packaging isn't even needed. It doesn't make sense. It might make more sense for the consumer, for the company to say, buy 1, it's $5. You buy 2, it's $9.50. You buy 4, it's $18.75. And so they get increasing discount with purchasing of more numbers of something. In effect, does the same thing, but now you don't have any overwrap on multiple purchases. It also works for bulk purchases. So take a look at what you're doing. Respect, you got to have health and safety concerns if you do that. So you can't put a bulk pack label around something with all the necessary information with ingredients and warnings and allergy warnings and nutritional information, all that on that. And then you take it off and you got an empty container in behind, because then the consumer doesn't know what they're consuming. So, respect all health and safety related requirements accordingly. So here's the one that's, first comes to mind. It wasn't too long ago, we had all the water in the marketplace was a 4x6 in a corrugated tray wrapped in plastic. Now we've got 4x6, but they're nested together, wrapped in plastic. And in fact, one company here in Ontario has now got 4x6, 100% recycled content PET water bottles. And their shrink wrap is now 20% recycled content as well. So they've taken it even one step further. So that's a long way from this to this. And the caps are even shrunk. The caps are now down to less than a gram. So, even though the Golden Design Rules don't speak to reduction, Sustainable Materials Management speaks to reduction. So this is a good reduction possibility initiative as well. And also, it helps you getting out of using excess plastic. Now, there are other alternatives to plastic, or even within plastic, if you want to look at it. So here's the one that I'm talking about. Here's a multi-pack. And so they've got this overwrap. It's probably PET, just by looking at how shiny it is. You can tell PET is very shiny packaging. So it's got a PET overwrap that got the same label as what's underneath on each can, but now it's on the label. So you really need to have that overwrap label, because that PET label will not get recycled. It ends up being disposed. So that's straight to disposal. We're not maximizing yields, which is what we want to do. Would it be better to do something like this? Maybe a 2-pack cap that goes on this. These are HDPE. They were invented in Canada on the West Coast by a company out there. These can be recycled over and over again. So you go in, and when you're buying, now they're showing blanks here, of course, right? But commonly you can go into a liquor store here or a beer store, and you can buy individuals, and you create your own 6-pack. Well, there's a nice way to create your own 6-pack with a lid that you can carry. Alternatively, for necked bottles, you could have just a bridge that goes between them. And so you carry it, and you have it, you carry it, and you don't have to have a shrink wrap around it, right? Now, there are also paper-based alternatives. Coke's got the sleeve that just slides over the top of Coke cans. And so you're carrying it that way with a piece of box board. The standard 6-pack cluster pack, you see these all over the place, from everything from soft drinks to, no, what else have I seen again? Antifreeze for your car, right? The little ones, antifreeze containers. So, you know, you look at this, it can go there. And then the other one, we have our 2021 award winner from PAC is Bud Light. So instead of having a shrink wrap around it, and if you go to the beer store and you look at it, you'll see beer cans, a 4-pack, shrink wrapped with plastic. And then beside it, you'll see the Bud Light with a corrugated top on it. It's got a little handle on the top. You just pick it up and you can carry your Bud Light without worrying about having excess plastic. So there are alternatives out in the marketplace right now to avoid using plastic altogether, or if you're going to use plastic, at least make it more reasonable in terms of being recyclable at the end of the day, right? Or less of it. So this is a lot better because this could get recycled depending on size. 2-inch minus is typically lost in the recycling system, but anything greater than that can be recycled. So this sleeve will not be, but this option, for example, would be.
Dan, quick one, I'll jump in here. The question is simply, if you go back to the previous slide with those different, the question is simply, should we prefer fiber applications over plastics? And I think the question, Natalia, is for these applications in particular, rather than just as a blanket question.
If for a prepackaged product like the Bud Light here, this makes sense. But imagine if you're going in and you're giving people the option in your store to purchase multiples, but of different kinds, then this makes sense, right? Because now you can snap together 6 different soft drinks or 6 different, you know, your favorite seltzers or beer or whatever. You can snap them together without having overwrap on it. And then it also gives the customer more options as well. Instead of saying, okay, well, yeah, that's a nice 6-pack, but I don't want 2 of those. I don't like raspberry seltzers. I only want blueberry and peach seltzers. I don't know, making up something, right? So the idea is that you can make up your own. So an overwrap such as this might not work, but on a prepackaged, this might be perfectly good, right? It's up to you. It depends on what your brand proposition is. Depends on what the package is that you're putting on the shelf. Is it going to sell itself? Bud Light is very distinctive packaging. Coke, very distinctive package. Everybody understands when they walk in and if they see that bright red and, you know, the script across it, that's a Coke can. Okay, great. So do you really need an overwrap on it that says this is a Coke can, or can you just put a sleeve on the top and say, here's your 6-pack of Coca-Cola, right? So it all depends on other factors. One of the things about sustainability is, you know, this is the short version of, you know, trying to wrap everything in and putting the Golden Design Rules within sustainable packaging as well. Sustainability is also not only environment, but also economic and social. Well, for your company, if you move to a package that the consumer doesn't want, it might be better for the environment, but if it doesn't sell any product, then you go out of business. So that's not sustainable for your company. It's also not sustainable for the employees, right? You're putting a lot of people out of work. So that's a social implication as well. So bear that in mind whenever you make a packaging decision, that sustainability also has to be sustainable to you as a company.
Got it.
Starting to bleed in a little bit of our sustainability course, Andrew.
And just quick, we're at a couple minutes past 11.
We're doing not too badly. I think we're just almost exactly, we're a little short of halfway. So I'll pick it up a little bit for you. Goal design rule number 5. For the most part, it's the same as number 1, except it applies to PET thermoform trays. So, you know a thermoform tray, you see it in the produce aisle, it's got spinach and salad, you know, like mesclun mix, things like that. You see it in the bakery aisle for your muffins. You can see it in you know, cake tray covers. You see it in frozen food. You know, you'll have a bottom on it and then your product there, and then you put a cover over that. So there's a lot of PET thermoform in the marketplace. It's very, very common. It replaced polystyrene. One of the other reasons why polystyrene is not around much anymore is it was replaced by PET. Just so people understand, though, believe it or not, PET has a worse environmental footprint than polystyrene does. But we won't get into that today. I'll open up that can of worms. Anyhow, the rules are really the same. So no colored opaque PET thermoform, but again, this is where there's a difference. When this golden design rule was first developed, they were going to allow colors, they were going to allow opaque, because in Europe, they're not using the technology that we are here in Canada for the recycling of PET thermoforms. In Canada, you can't make a PET thermoform into a bottle by itself. The intrinsic viscosity, it's one of the characteristics of the plastic. By itself, thermoforms cannot be blow molded into new bottles. They can be made into more thermoform, but it's also very difficult in the recycling system to separate thermoforms from PET bottles. There's a brand new technology out there now. They do see the slight chemical difference between them and they can start doing it. But again, it's brand new and it's very expensive. And in reality, it's not needed. At Ice River Springs in Canada, in Ontario, they take all the bales that come out of municipalities, about 85% of the bales that come out of all municipalities across the province of Ontario, 17 million people, and they put it through a special process where they can take the thermoform grade, and by putting it into a nitrogen bath reactor, they can increase the intrinsic viscosity and actually make thermoform back in the bottle. When the Golden Design Rule team found out about this technology, they actually changed the Golden Design Rule to say, oh, okay, well then why not make it the same as Golden Design Rule number 1, no opaque, just clear. But Europe and the United States are still on the track to have thermoforms separated from bottles and make thermoforms from thermoforms and bottles from bottles, which is unfortunate because a bottle grade PET is higher quality, a better PET in terms of what you can do with it at its end of life than the thermoform. And as such, it increases value. It's not upcycling as much as that it's to Ellen MacArthur's wording, it's keeping it in its highest, best end use possible, right? In other words, keep it in the economy as long as you can. So Ice River Springs takes 85% of the PET, and the bales are about 66% bottles and 33% thermoforms, the 2-to-1 ratio approximately. And so they take those, they make them all back into bottles, they fill them with water, they send them to most of our national grocers. Chains are all using 100% recycled content PET water bottles. And then people put them back in the glue box, they go back to Ice River Springs again, it goes around and around. How's that for a circular economy? It's beautiful, right? But the big point is with this is that thermoform being clear can be made into thermoform, or it can be made into either more thermoforms, which they also do at Ice River Springs, but more importantly, they can make the thermoform into bottles, but they're clear and they make clear bottles. They got a slight blue tinge to them. They don't do that to hide anything. They do that because it uses less energy to make the bottle, because the plastic heats up a little better, a little faster. Anyhow, it's a story unto itself. CPET is crystallized PET. It creates if you start with clear, it'll make white. If you start with a light blue, it'll make a blue. But the problem is that in the recycling system, the optical sorters will see PET. The manual sorters, which are used to separate it out, or even AI, they're going to see the opaque nature of that plastic, and they're probably going to pull it off thinking, oh, that's opaque PET. We don't want that. Unfortunately, it's not true. CPET, when you melt it down, it loses its color because it was a thermal coloring, not a ink coloring. And it could be made into more PET. So people are working on trying to figure out how to capture CPET and make it go back into more PET. So thermoforms, no black at all, no black period in PET. Yes, black is allowed in other resins, but not in PET. No opaque. So the typical, tray you might see either for quick service and pre-made foods in grocery stores or wherever might have the black bottom and a clear lid. The idea is to go to perfectly clear. Now, yes, I do recognize this is a berry container. It's got little slots in it, but I could have gotten a different picture out to show you this package in this form. The idea is that clear bottom, clear on top. No opaque PET. There's lots of this. Right now, mushrooms have moved from polypropylene recently there's a lot of opaque PET. Thermoforms, those need to be removed and replaced with either clear PET thermoforms, or they need to go back to polypropylene as long as they don't continue to use the fillers they do. That's Golden Design Rule 7. And here's another one of our award winners. So here's a PET tray like this. Here's a PET tray from one of the producers in Canada. There's another one of our award winners, and they put a PET film over it, and it's recyclable. The the film won't get recycled, but at least the tray will be recycled and it's clear PET. Anything else? Or any questions on number 5?
So far, so good. Dan.
Very good. So golden design rule number 6 is around flexible packaging. Now this is polyethylene and polypropylene monomer materials. So think of a bread bag, for example, as a PE film bag, but it's a monomer material. It's just polyethylene, just polypropylene. You see it for cracker packs and other things like that. It can be just polypropylene. The idea is that with this golden design rule, you should have a minimum of 80, this is the golden design rule, minimum 80% polyethylene or polypropylene or mixed polyolefins. So that's PE and PP. Now, in Canada, talking to the markets that deal with the recycling of these products, these packages, 80% is not acceptable. When you think about it, make a cake and you need 2 cups of flour, right? If 20% of that flour that you purchased is something else, whatever it is, right? And you're trying to make a cake, how are you going to make a cake with something that's 20% not the ingredients you need? Well, it's the same thing that applies when you're making plastic. If 20% of the plastic that you purchased from a recycling facility, you know, that polypropylene is, or polyethylene film is 20% non-polyethylene, how are you going to make more polyethylene pellets out of it, right? It doesn't make sense. So the guidance for Canada, and yes, there are separate guidances. If you go to the, Andrew, if you can pop the microsite from CPP and go to the bottom of the microsite, there are the Canadian guidance for the golden design rules. The marketplace here wants 90% PE or polypropylene. In fact, they prefer just 90% polyethylene, period, not even polypropylene. You're limited to 10% of barrier layers. Barrier layers cannot be incompatible, so no PVC, PVDC, no fiber, no aluminum foil. You can have aluminum oxide. You see down here, we use barrier layers and coatings that are not to limit recycling. So go to the APR design guides, but aluminum oxide, silicon dioxide, EVOH is good. One market, and I had a good conversation with them, PVOH is not compatible because it has a problem, it breaks down in water. And you know, they just said, no, it's not a barrier layer for recycling purposes. EVOH is fine. But again, each one should not exceed 5% and totally not more than 10% of the whole package. Now, what this is also saying, if you see there's no PET, when you look at the packaging that's in the marketplace, most of the stand-up pouches, the vast majority, more than 95%, I'd probably say more than 98%. I don't have measurements for sure, but it's the vast majority of pouches in the marketplace, the stand-up pouches, are a PET outer layer and either polypropylene or polyethylene as the inside layer. You always tell their PET. Remember I said about the shiny packaging? Next time in your grocery store, go down the candy aisle and just look at all those plastic packages, right? They all shine. It's like they're crying out to you to buy me, buy me. That's PET outer layer. There'll probably be a barrier layer in there to protect the product from light or from oxygen or whatever, and then a polypropylene or polyethylene inside layer. And those are not recyclable. There's no way to delaminate the structures to get the PET out and the PE because you can't recycle them together. You can't make a plastic out of them blended together. One company I was talking to did make something out of them, but it's a very hard, brittle is maybe not the right word, but it's definitely not going back into packaging. It might be able to go into some low grade application. I don't know, forms for concrete or Barks car liners or something like that, but it's certainly not going to be made into anything related to packaging at all. So avoid those at all wherever you can. Choose monostructures where possible, so just PE. And there are evolving technologies where there are PE with a barrier layer in PE. So PET can be replaced. PET's got a special characteristic about it. It's also good at keeping in odor. So if you go down the in the grocery store, you go down the laundry aisle, for example, you notice you don't smell every single one of the different laundry detergents in the aisle because those little pods that are inside those pouches, the PET outer layer keeps the smell inside. And that was a requirement to put them in the market because they didn't want people getting sick from all the smells coming out of the laundry aisle. But they're not recyclable, right, in those structures. Monostructures are recyclable. In Canada, keep them PE wherever possible. So look for evolving technologies in PE application, multi-laminated structures with a barrier layer in it to replace your PET/PE structures that you might be using in your films right now. The reason we want to do this is right now it's so difficult to recycle films because of all the different combinations. The public does not understand the differences. I could show you pictures of products in pouches and in film bags. The pouches are not recyclable. The film is recyclable, and yet it's exactly the same product that's in them. In this case, it was frozen fruit. And you're going, imagine the poor public, you're trying to explain to them that one's recyclable, one isn't. And so you've got strawberries in a pouch beside a big bag of, it's a bigger bag, it's a bulk size package of strawberries in a bag. The bag you can recycle, the pouch you can't recycle. Well, imagine they get taken home and they go, oh, well, I recycled my bag of strawberries last week. This week, it's just a smaller pack because I'm going on vacation, I only wanted enough for a few days. So I'm going to throw this pouch into the recycling system. Well, hold on a second. You can't recycle the pouch. It won't recycle, and it contaminates the PE film stream. So consistency in application will allow film recyclers to do more with it. They won't have to deal with all these other resin combinations, and there's a chance that we can actually get to more recycled resin for films. So here's an example. This is the one you commonly see, right? Multi-material, multi-laminated structure. Here is a multi-laminated but mono-material structure. And here's another one. Go down the coffee aisle. All the coffee in the coffee aisle is up multi-material, multi-laminated structures. Here's an award of distinction winner from 2021. The Holos products, these are recyclable PE pouches with a barrier layer in it. It's compatible with the Canadian guidance. So these are recyclable structures. Unfortunately, they're not allowed to call them recyclable, but that's for a different reason under the Competition Bureau, because of access, not only access to putting pouches in the recycling system, but also the recycling of the pouches. So they're technically recyclable, but they're not allowed to call them recyclable. And that's a separate discussion for a separate day. But just bear in mind that if we got everybody to move from this structure to this structure, then we could just say everything's recyclable. So, minimum, like I said, just wrapping it up, avoid incompatible barrier layers, minimum 90% PE preferred for the Canadian marketplace. Any questions on number 6?
No more questions, Dan. I just wanted to highlight for everyone that Dan mentioned the APR, so that's the Association of Plastic Recyclers based in the US, and he mentioned the design guide. So if you're not familiar with it, it's a very detailed guide for plastics, but we find it very useful. It's internationally recognized, and so certainly worth checking out. And I think Dan brought it up with reference to barrier layers. So it addresses that topic and many other topics. So the link is there in the chat for you.
Yeah, the link's actually in the next, under the next Golden Design Rule.
Okay. Okay, good. Yeah.
And the other thing with the APR design guide, I won't speak to it when I get to that. It's the next slide after this one, is it's by resin too. So it isn't just a design guide for packaging. It's one for PET, HDPE, flexibles, etc. So it's a very useful guide. Like Andrew said, it is recognized. Europe does recognize the APR design guide. They do have their own, but the APR is recognized as being a useful design guide for plastic packaging everywhere. So Golden Design Rule number 7 is around HDPE and polypropylene packaging specifically, but really I've already introduced some of this with respect to PET packaging. The idea is that don't put anything on or in your package over, in terms of labels, your seals, whatever you've got, your cap, closures, whatever, that are going to impede the ability to recycle the product. So you got to look at what your label is made out of, make sure that it's compatible with it, right? So if you've got an in-mold label, if it's HDPE rigid bottle, then make sure that the in-mold label is HDPE, preferably. If not, then at least polypropylene, because it's a polyolefin. Polypropylene and HDPE are not completely compatible, so it's best to use HDPE with HDPE. Careful how much printing you've got in there, and if you are using printing on it, that the ink will wash off, won't stay in suspension, because then it sticks to the flake when they're making new plastic, and then of course it discolors it, causes it to go, especially if they're trying to color separate the HDPE into white blue, for example, to make a new HDPE pellet of one of those colors. and all of a sudden you've got all this ink attaching itself to the flake, you're not going to be able to make white, right, going forward. So.
Hey, Dan, I'll jump in. Question from Erica. What will determine if inks or solvents in flex packaging are recyclable?
You should be able to get from your manufacturer, from your supplier, now the specifications, and if they don't tell you whether or not it is, what's happening more and more is the companies that are buying the packaging and putting it in the market are now demanding that the manufacturer of the packaging prove that any element of the package is not going to be problematic for recycling. So there are testing procedures that can be done, like the APR design guide. You can test for recyclability of flexibles. For example, with these new companies that are coming out with alternative barrier layers to put into PE pouch structures, for example. Well, hold on a second. You can't just put any barrier layer in there. For example, if you put a nylon barrier layer in, it's going to be a huge impediment to recycling. So what they say is go get it tested. The best thing to do is ask that your supplier get their product tested to prove to you that there's not going to be a problem. Because I work with a number of companies, as does Andrew, and the number of times that the company, we get on a phone call and, oh, this company says it's recyclable. Well, that's nice. It's not. And here's why. No, but they told me it's recyclable. Have them prove it. Go get it tested and provide you with the test results. Because they're in the market of selling product or packaging. Sorry, you're in the market of putting something in the marketplace that you can tell the consumer in good conscience that it will be recycled. And if they don't match, then that's where you get concerns with being told, somebody saying you're greenwashing, and it happens all too often. So now it's best just to push back on your supplier to make sure that they can prove to you that it is the right package. So the idea behind Golden Design Rule number 7 is you want to address, you want to maximize the value for packaging. You want to reduce the yield loss. So if you're using a lot of fillers, again, like I said earlier, that you can't make polyethylene, or imagine trying to make a new polypropylene tub and 20% of it or 30% and up to 40% of some of these polypropylene tubs can be filler. Well, you can't make polypropylene out of talc, right? Calcium carbonate. As I say, you can't make plastic out of stone. So you have to watch what goes into it. It focuses on other semi-rigids. So it doesn't have to be a rigid package, but it's not a flexible package. So you get some things that are in between. Some, I'm trying to think of a product, deli packs for things like that. You have to look at the labeling, the printing, the closures, the seal, adhesive, fillers, and liners. It's all of it. And that's why immediately we point you to the APR packaging design guide for all of these things, because there's just too much to cover in the Golden Design Rules course. You almost need the course that Paul Waller teaches on plastic packaging. It's a 3-day course on plastic packaging. He just wrapped up one, what was it, 2 weeks ago, I think it was. And the idea is that there's so much to think about when you're trying to make sure that you get a really good package. So commonly, you see tubes is one that can be any combination. Sometimes they're metallized inside, sometimes they're mixtures of plastics. Nowadays, another one of our award winners, but Colgate came out 2 years ago, I believe it is 2 years ago, 2020, they announced 2021, they were award winner with a fully compatible HDPE tube. It's recyclable. A lot of the HDPE tubes in the marketplace now are recyclable. People aren't aware of it, but again, it comes down to what are you using for your barrier layer inside it, so that you're not using something like nylon, which is not compatible. You're using compatible barrier layers inside, so that the tube can be recycled, or there's nothing that's going to stop if the tube does get into the recycling system. The outside layer may be HDPE, but the inside is something that will impede the ability to make new HDPE. In-mold labels ensure it's the same material as per one of the questions earlier, right? So you see a lot of it in ice cream, all sorts of buckets. There's many, many things, laundry detergent, etc., where the idea is that this label in here cannot impede the ability. So it should be, if this is an HDPE tub, then make sure that the in-mold label is the same material. Now, I know this shows an aluminum can, but it applies to all of it, is that the label that's on the container, and in fact, there are now plastic cans, if you want to call them that. they're being used for some beverages in the marketplace. So this is plastic and this is a metal rim, which is a real problem for recyclers. They don't like metal at all. But regardless, if this is say an HDPE container and it's got a full body sleeve on it, and there are examples in the marketplace where there's HDPE in the market with a PET sleeve on it, and so it doesn't get recycled because it ends up on the PET line, not the HDPE line, and it gets thrown away, right? Because they have to get rid of it. The PET guys don't want it because it's HDPE, and the HDPE guys don't have it, so they can't recycle it. So when you're putting a full wrap label on, look for a small label so they can see the container underneath. Now, again, this is a PET, but the same thing applies. It's just a good example picture of what a full wrap label could look like, but you can see the resin behind it, and you can make sure that bottle, tub, whatever it is, goes to the right stream in the recycling facility. Adhesives, make sure that your adhesives are water soluble or caustic soluble. That's a typical wash that's done for plastic. This is a glass bottle. I know it's not plastic, but the point is here is that you notice that the label just washes off. So it's not going to impede the ability to recycle. If this was a plastic bottle underneath, then the label would wash off and you can get no impeding elements of the package in the recycling process. Fillers, I already mentioned calcium carbonate. This is a huge issue. Talking to one recycler, they were saying they were losing about 40 to 45% of the polypropylene through the wash cycle at the recycler because the polypropylene, which typically has a density less than 1, or should have a density less than 1, with all the calcium carbonate was in it, was giving it a density greater than 1, and it was sinking out. Optical sorters don't look at density. They look at the resin that they see. They find the polypropylene, but when it goes to the end market and they use sink float to get rid of things like the label, which might be tea, for example, they sink out, but so do the polypropylene tubs. Well, now you've got a problem with, you've lost yield, it doesn't get recycled, and it's a waste, right? So avoid a lot of fillers where the density changes to greater than 1 gram per cubic centimeter. Caps and closures, the caps will be recycled, generally speaking, always, even if they're, like if you put an HDP cap on an HDP bottle, of course it gets recycled. A polypropylene cap will be recycled. Just avoid anything that's in it that there's a chance that it's going to end up getting blended with it, or make sure it won't wash out. Try to avoid wherever you can PVC and PVDC as safety seals, just because they are problematic plastics. When you melt them, like I said, there's health and safety concerns against it. And if the seal stays on, like again, you might seal it, but if there's an adhesive on it and it stays on the HDPE or polypropylene container, then now you're going to put that through the HDPE cycle for recycling, and that's going to cause health and safety concerns, not to mention contaminate the HDPE or polypropylene. So any questions on that before I hand the floor over to Andrew?
Yeah, Dan, a quick specific one on barrier layers. So Mihaela has a question, and this comes from the cosmetics space. And so they have PE extruded tubes and use EVOH. And so the question is that scenario one that's recyclable? My quick reply, I think the GDRs say that it depends on the percentage of that EVOH. And if it's 5% by weight or less, then it would be acceptable. But is there anything you would add to that?
Yeah, the Golden Design Rules strictly state that no single barrier layer should be more than 5% of the packaging weight, to a maximum of 10% of the package weight for all barrier layers. Now, talking on the ground with the end markets, they're saying that if they had to, they could handle plastic packaging with a 10% EVOH barrier layer in it. However, just to let you know that the way that the end markets manage EVOH, because that's not polyethylene, and they're trying to make polyethylene, as it is with anything that's in there that's not the base material, the base resin, is dilution is the solution to pollution. So what they do is they take a lot of good product out, they dilute it to get the percentage of any additives, barriers, or whatever that's in the package down to a point where they can make a new pellet and then a new product or package out of that recycled material. So EVOH is not a problem per se. Just make sure you're not using no more than 10% ever, and preferably no more than 5%.
Good.
Andrew, we got a quarter of the deck to go, and yeah, about that, and it's over to you.
Great. Okay, thank you. Alrighty, everyone. Hello. And so we're on to number 8. And number 8 is distinct from number 4 in that the packaging in this case is not going to reach the consumer. So we're talking about B2B packaging. And so per what is, I think it's fair to say, the widely accepted hierarchy of assessment in terms of waste management assessment, we want to first ask ourselves, is there an opportunity to eliminate unnecessary B2B plastics? And the Ellen MacArthur Foundation talks about elimination in 2 ways. The first way is direct elimination. So can it just be removed simply? And of course, though, with the caveat being, if by removing it, we do not compromise what we call the effectiveness of the packaging, which could mean all sorts of things, but that includes, you know, protecting whatever is inside it, protecting the product, preserving it, protecting it, etc. But there are also potentially marketing considerations. If by removing the plastic packaging, we get rid of opportunities for branding and our marketing, then that may be a problem. The bottom line is, one asks oneself, is there an opportunity for direct elimination? Yes or no? And maybe that goes, maybe it is in the middle, where you can eliminate some of it, which would essentially be reduction. You know, so maybe there's some opportunities there. The other way EMF thinks about elimination is what they call innovative elimination. And the best example I could give you that's at least close to the B2B space, I'm still hunting for a direct B2B example here, but would be the SIOC concept, the ships in its own container idea. So you may or may not have seen a few years ago, Tide came out with the Tide box. So this is an e-commerce solution where one orders online and is shipped the Tide laundry detergent in the box, and that's it. So the same box that you put on your shelf in your laundry room is in fact the shipping container too. So in that case, an example of innovative elimination of what otherwise would be shipping packaging, or you know, in this case it's B2C, but I hope you get the idea, just to illustrate the concept. So that's the first port of call. Is there an opportunity for elimination? Concurrently, we would say that it's also important to consider reuse options for B2B packaging. And I'll give you an example. And in fact, I will put this in the chat. So there was an interesting report that I came across earlier this year. It's called, another acronym for you, SWAP. So it was the Stretch Wrap Alternative Project. So bear with me one moment. Send to everyone. Okay, so that's in the chat for you. So this is led by Microsoft. It has the report involved the Ellen MacArthur Foundation and a number of other organizations participated, and it looked at circular solutions for, in this case, stretch wrap, which I think we all know there's an awful lot of stretch wrap used in the B2B space. And the report, or the project, looked at reuse, recycling, and even composting work streams. So I'm not going to get into the findings. We don't have time to do that today, but you've got the link. And I did just want to mention that as far as reuse, so after elimination, consider reuse. The reuse pilot of this project focused on reusable pallet covers. And the report provides some fairly granular and useful insights. And I'll give you an example of a company, again, highlighted by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, that provides reusable pallet wraps in North America. I don't know if they sell to South America or elsewhere. That would be an interesting question, but for sure to Canada and the US. And it's called Reusa Wraps, REUSA Wraps. And I had a good chat with the owner just the other day. So it's an interesting solution. Just to give you an example that there are solutions in the marketplace now for reuse options in the B2B space. So one other concludes here that there are or there aren't viable ways to eliminate and or to reuse, to provide a reusable option. But regardless, so whatever you conclude there, it's still important whether your packaging ends up as single use or reusable. It's still important to consider improving what the Ellen MacArthur Foundation calls material circulation. And that's just an umbrella idea for lots of things, including recyclability. So a la much of what we're talking about today, can you improve the recyclability of whatever the packaging is? But also, and very importantly, and this is point number B here before you, is using recycled content, And so again, whether it's single-use packaging or reusable packaging, consider using recycled content. And so in all of these cases, in all of these considerations, and the SWAP report does a good job of highlighting this, there are going to be trade-offs. So it's nice to say, well, we could include recycled content as an example, but it may be more expensive, or it may be hard to find on a consistent basis. So today we wanted to highlight some of the hierarchy of considerations, and that there are options in the marketplace, but it always will require deeper analysis to find out whether it's viable for your business. So just to, again, looking at the slide before you, I would, GDRs, they have it as A, B, C in that order. We would suggest, you could flip C and B and right off the top, consider elimination or reuse concurrently, and then get to, depending on where that leads you, then you consider how best to improve material circulation, including the inclusion of recycled content, which incidentally in the B2B space is really quite a viable option. Unlike B2C applications where there's, for example, food contact with your packaging, in the B2B space, if we're talking about, say, reusable plastic containers, it's totally possible, and there are lots of options in the marketplace where reusable content is part of the packaging. And a lot of the suppliers are already ahead of that, but these are questions that if you're a buyer, you can ask and say, is there recycled content, yes or no? If not, can there be? How much does it cost, etc. Okay, onward, Dan, next slide, please. Yeah, and this is just to briefly illustrate that there are, even on the right, well, actually middle slide and right slide, these are plastic packaging options with recycled content. And you see, you do get, when recycled content is included, you're going to get variations in color, sometimes texture, but color variations. But again, in B2B applications, this often isn't particularly important, unlike B2C, where it is very important, the overall look and feel of the product when it reaches the consumer's hands. Next slide, please. And this, I just did a quick screenshot from that SWAP report. Again, that's the one I put in the chat, just to give you a quick visual of the reusable pallet wrap. So that's bottom right. You see Cisco in this case was the partner that actually worked with this solution. And then I won't go into the details, but you're going to get sent the deck. And this is just a brief summary of the reusable work stream, some of the conclusions there. Next slide, please. I'll add that, again, I'm giving you a link to a 60-page report. So it's well done, it's well written, it's properly edited, but again, it's a rabbit hole. But that particular report I did find worth reading if your company wants to look at stretch wrap, which is a good place to seek change, because there are alternatives in the marketplace. All right, so I'm gonna check the chat. We're good. I'll pause though. Any questions? How is an 8-color Oh, Erica. Okay, Dan. This is more going back to some of your content. So the question is, how is an 8-color printed opaque white PE polyethylene recyclable versus a clear PET bottle?
Wow.
Yeah,
First of
good question.
I'm not even sure where, I assume that's a PE rigid, not a PE flexible.
Mm.
I'm not even sure where they would ever have the same application, but assuming that they do,
Oh, flexible pouch, flexible pouch.
flexible pouch.
Mm.
So they both are recyclable as they are a clear bottle. The PET markets are much stronger than the PE film markets in North America. And so if you wanted to, a stronger story that something would be recycled, I would say the PET bottle would be over PE film. And it isn't that the PE film is not a recyclable film, but rather because it isn't collected for recycling due to the issues with respect to contamination from a lot of pouches, and markets are much more reticent about taking PE bales from recycling facilities because it's just so hard for them to make a clean PE bale anymore.
Hope that helps, Erica. Feel free to follow up with us post-session if you want to noodle that one over a bit more. Our contact information will be included in the deck. Okay, good. All righty, so we'll move to 9. Last thing I'll say on number 8 is simply that even though B2B packaging is addressed by just one of the 9 GDRs, it really is an interesting place to seek change within your organization, because it just doesn't have some of the restrictions that consumer-facing packaging has. And so it's quite an interesting space to learn more about packaging sustainability, and there's an ability to make change potentially quite quickly. So that's what I'll say there, and on to 9. So this is about on-pack recycling instructions. So it connects to, instructions and labeling. So consumer packaging, labeling on consumer packaging. So a couple of basic ideas we want to cover for you here. The first is that consumers, you, me, Dan, we all have a role to play in sorting. We are sorters, whether it's at home or on the go. When we're out and about and we finish with something and we want to put it somewhere in some sort of bin. And we're dealing with 4 main sorting streams. So the traditional ones, the recycling bin, the organics bin, at least that's become, at least in recent years, more, call it traditional or available, certainly in Canada. And then of course the garbage bin. And then there's the idea of the 4th bin, the reuse bin, which that idea of the 4th bin, I spend a lot of time in the reusable space, but I do see it gaining some traction. So those are the 4. But the point being, we have a role to play. We are sorters. Consumers are sorters, number 1. Second, that clear and accurate instructions on packaging can improve sorting, which then leads to things like reduced contamination in the recycling stream, like of the recycling that enters, say, the material recovery facility, and then a corresponding increase in the quality of materials moving through the system, which is certainly a core objective of the GDRs. Get the quality up, reduce contamination, quality up. So the idea is by improved sorting, we can help with that. I'll give you an example in Toronto. I'm based in Toronto, and the data is from 2019, because it's not that far out of date. And in 2019, the contamination rate in Toronto's consumer recycling stream, like the municipal recycling stream, I should say, was close to 30%, which is not a good number for lots of reasons. The contamination reason from a recycling quality point of view being one, and then also from a cost point of view, it just costs the city a lot of money to handle it. There are penalties after a certain amount of contamination. It just costs money to handle all that material that isn't valuable. So a couple of other points. So those are the first two basic ideas around our role in sorting and the consequences of bad sorting. Also, Canadians have, in general, very high access to recycling services across the country, and relatively similar material and format acceptance across jurisdictions. Even though recycling is handled at the municipal level, there are 1,000 different programs in Canada, it's relatively similar across those jurisdictions, say compared with the United States, as an example. So that being said, I think it's fair to say that the guidance for businesses, like many of yours, on, call it disposal labeling, like what to put on pack to guide the consumer and help with the sorting process, is, I'll use the word fuzzy. It's not clear. And so I have found 3 different relevant Competition Bureau of Canada documents. I should say we have at PAC. They're at the bottom of the slide there. The first one, in our view, is actually really quite good. It's very detailed and contains a lot of relevant information, both on access, like what counts as recyclable in terms of access. And so the language in that document was, if at least half the population, in other words, 50%, has access to collection facilities, a claim of recyclable may be made without any other qualifications. So it spoke to that. It also spoke to the need to examine, or the language was, it was not enough to confirm that there are collection systems, but also that there are facilities to process the recycling materials once it's gone through the system. So really an onus on the business to confirm that not only is there access to recycling, but the materials will actually be recycled. And this is really important. So I'm saying it speaks to all this. However, as you see in brackets after that first reference, as of November last year, the document's been archived by the government. And it specifically says, it won't be updated, and it doesn't necessarily reflect current thinking on the part of the Government of Canada. And so it directs us to document number 2, which is the current reference, which is very short, and then refers one to other documents, like the third one, the Guide to Consumer Packaging and Labeling, which doesn't speak at all to access to recycling or actual recycling processes. It speaks to other things like, font size, like kind of the legal requirements of labeling in general, not just about is it recyclable or not. It does speak to all the topic Dan introduced in GDR number 3 on the slack fill and headspace. It does deal with that, but it doesn't deal, in our view, particularly well at all with kind of disposal labeling. So we have reached out to the government for some clearer direction on this, and I actually heard back just a couple of days ago saying, we'll get back to you soon. So we hope, in the future, in the near future, to have clearer direction sort of on behalf of the government in this area. I just noticed something pop up in the chat here. So I want to, about using PCR plastic on consumer goods. There are articles mentioning about the presence of BPA in recycled plastic. How accurate are these articles? Just rumors? Any comment on this or guideline? My initial instinct, partly given our just time in this session, is that Mihaela, we could, we at PAC and our team, Dan, I, and Alan, our other member, we have done some exploration into these kind of, call them health concerns related to additives in plastic packaging, but I think it would be best if we carry that on offline, which I'm happy to do. But Dan, do you have any comment on that one, or is best offline?
Yeah, I think it's best offline. I haven't heard anything. It wasn't mentioned. I was just up with the PET recycler recently. BPA and recycled plastic, if it's not going to a food grade application, isn't going to be an issue. And there's only 2 plastics where you can get food grade. That one is PET and the other one is HCP Natural, and the HCP Natural is coming from HCP Natural milk jugs. So it's milk jug to milk jug. And there are a number of companies that have got approval. I think FDA just approved 6 more last week for food grade PET. If there was BPA in it, in food grade applications, I'm sure the FDA would have flagged it and not allowed it to proceed. So it's counter to what I'm hearing with respect to it. I haven't heard anybody complaining about BPA. BPA is in plastic. To be honest, there's BPA in the liners in your tin cans. So I know it's there, but I have not heard of anybody flagging it as an issue when it comes to food grade plastic PCR.
Okay, Mihaela, best we can do right now, but follow up if you wish. Dan, next slide, please. Thank you. So just as muddy as this disposal labeling, the guidance on labeling in this area is, a few, call them initial recommendations from our team. So one, just the basic idea that improved sorting really does have value on a number of fronts. Secondly, this observation that just know that in Canada, all rigid plastics are recyclable, but not all of them actually get recycled, whether it's a PVC rigid, for example. So again, that speaks to the due diligence around understanding what happens to the packaging, even if it gets collected and sorted. Asking yourselves what will really happen to it afterwards, and taking some responsibility for choices related to that outcome of the material. On the other hand, flexible plastic packaging recycling, as Dan has said, is limited to, at this point, polyethylene films, and not things like stand-up pouches, whether or not they're mono or multi-material situations. Another point is that those little resin identification codes, and they can be useful when we're talking to identify materials, whether it's number 1 PET, number 2 and number 4 the polyethylenes, number 5 polypropylene, etc. Those aren't recycling codes, and they don't help MRFs with sorting. And actually, by law, they're not to be used with that Mobius loop, those chasing arrows, which frequently we see that situation. Dan and I see that all the time. But just so you know, they're not to be conflated. Often a packaging manufacturer will put that resin identification code on, which could be in a triangle, which is fine, but don't conflate them. They're two totally different structures, if you will, or programs. Resin identification codes and then recycling information, they're separate. We would argue, given the kind of fuzziness around the guidance, the second to last bullet, use on-pack labeling with packaging that might be confusing to consumers. Like, that's where it's especially important. Especially with multi-component packaging. So if your packaging has different components, which require the consumer to use the different sort in different streams, then it might well be useful to use some sort of scheme. And Dan, if you want to go to the next slide, actually. To use, for example, a scheme like the How to Recycle H2R scheme. I'm getting a here. Not sure why, but this is based out of the US. It's done. Green Blue is the sort of sponsoring organization. They're a nonprofit, and this scheme has been around for several years and provides labeling for all sorts of different situations, including, and I'll draw your attention to the second from the right, so where it says not yet recycled. It's really important that if your packaging isn't currently recyclable and it should go in the garbage, it's important to tell the consumer to do that. Obviously not a consumer relations winner, and you might want to be thinking about why isn't it recyclable? But in a number of cases, packaging that is not recyclable may in fact have lower overall environmental impacts, like a pouch compared to a rigid container for something like coffee. Routinely has far lower impact. So in that case, it's okay to say this should go in the garbage and save everybody a lot of time and money, while potentially you're thinking about other options. So in the interest of time, Dan, I know we've just got about 6 minutes left here. So I'll just do a very brief wrap here. So this is a sum up slide for the GDRs just around, high level decision making. In the blue horizontal box, one asks oneself the question, are there regional design guides for whatever plastic resin and application we're considering? And is it possible to follow these guidelines? So in our case, at least certainly in the Canadian context, today we've provided you with regional, in other words, Canadian guidelines for the GDRs. And so your answer to that question would be yes. If you're selling into the Canadian marketplace, then yes, there are relevant guidelines. And certainly that's true of various other jurisdictions globally. And then if no, well then, there may well be something in the works in the next 2 to 3 years, because many of the global objectives, including for the plastic pacts, are organized around 2025 timelines. So next up, Dan. So I am going to do a very brief introduction for everyone on the call today of a tool that PAC Global has developed in the past couple of years. It's called PIP 360. You see it there top right. So Packaging Innovation Pathways to 360. It is a benchmarking tool for your packaging. It's an online tool that essentially assesses your current packaging, assuming you have basic information on, what is it made of, how much does it weigh, some basic packaging specs, which, mind you, aren't always readily available. Not everyone has those right away. But once one does have those basic packaging specs, the tool can assess the package, and it generates a score and then provides some high-level directional suggestions to improve the circularity of that package. And the two bottom bullets there highlight the fact that the upcoming version, it's version 2 of the tool, which is in the works, the tool will be consistent with both the Golden Design Rules, which we've covered today, and the Canada Plastics Pacts and the corresponding objectives of the Plastics Pact. So next slide, please. If you go to the next one, Dan. Just to say, it covers in granular detail, that last slide, all different types of plastic packaging. We've gone to great lengths to talk to brand owners, retailers, packaging manufacturers to capture plastic packaging in its entirety. And then this slide, just to quickly illustrate that, for example, the Canada Plastics Pact, if you're a signatory, then you're committing yourself to recycled content objectives. And so the tool would quickly report out on, whether or not you're meeting those objectives, and if you're and where you stand with that. So you could input 1, or you could input 1,000 packages, and it will provide you with an aggregate, summary of how you're doing with your packaging. So you know what, Dan, it's 2 minutes to the hour. I think at least we've highlighted, we have a tool, it's easy to use, it's inexpensive, it produces a scorecard that looks like this. And if you're interested, reach out to Dan or me. And then if you want to go to the next one, speaking of that, here we are. So Dan, me, and then our colleague, Alan Blake, who's also a wealth of knowledge, like Dan, 30 plus years of experience with packaging sustainability. So please feel free to reach out to us with any follow-up questions from today. And Dan, I will say, I know you've said already in some that the GDRs they're voluntary, but we believe this is one of the most effective ways for organizations to make constructive change with packaging sustainability, and that this is happening not only in Canada, not only in North America, but all over the world. And as illustrated here, there are many concrete benefits which flow from making these changes. And normally we will often run the session in sort of 2.5 to 3 hours. So we've done our very best to squeeze it into 2 hours today. So we hope it's been helpful for you. We appreciate your many good questions. And again, if you have others, please reach out to us after the session.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate your time today.
Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Thank you. Take care. Bye now.